Hello and welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Ethan.
Ethan, so today I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite short-lived TV series?
Oh, man. So for a while there, when I was watching TV in high school, everything that I liked ended up getting canceled. It was just one of those things where I was like cursed. But I would have to say that my favorite like short-lived TV show, one that like only ran for 2 seasons and then nothing else, there's not going to be a revival or anything, was Flight of the Conchords on HBO. Are you familiar at all with Flight of the Conchords?
I remember the title of the show, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay. So it's these 2 musicians from New Zealand just kind of living in New York and having like very awkward adventures around the city. And it's a musical series. There's like multiple songs every episode. It's great. Jermaine Clement and Brett, I forget what Brett's last name is, but it's Jermaine Clement who went on to do so many things. Like, he's in a lot of Disney stuff. He wrote songs for the Muppet movies, the ones with Jason Segel. This very small show that lasted for 2 seasons, just about 2 guys hanging out in the city, is like one of the most influential TV shows of the last 20 years now. And I love it. It's so good. It's such its own vibe. And I wish it went on longer, but they decided to end it over the course of 2 seasons. And one of the writer-directors of it went on to make the Jojo Rabbit and Thor Ragnarok, like Taika Waititi. He came from that show.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that either. That's awesome. I should watch it.
Oh, it's great. You might hate it because it's just like awkward humor. It's very slow and kind of boring. But what are your favorite short-lived TV shows?
So I have a couple. First, I think this is a pretty popular take, but Freaks and Geeks definitely needed more than 1 season. But along those same lines, there's this show that's very similar to Freaks and Geeks. It's a little more, like, I would say dramatic. It's called My So-Called Life. And
with
it
Jared
is...
Leto, baby.
Yes.
I hate that man. I can't tell you why. I just don't like him.
He is, this is like one of his first acting roles. He was like maybe 20. He's not the main character. The main character, her name in the show is Angela Chase, but God, she was the actress from Homeland. I don't remember. I'm blanking right now, but amazing. Loved her. Loved that show. Loved everything about it. It was so 90s, and it was just the best. I remember I watched the entirety of the show, because it was 1 season, in 1 weekend one time with my mom, who also loved the show when it first aired. And a funny thing about the show, it was canceled after 1 season, but it had gained such like a cult teenage following that they wanted to bring it back for more seasons, but the main actress and Jared Leto, they couldn't make their schedules work because he started doing music around that time. And she was doing other acting things, obviously. So unfortunately, My So-Called Life never got a 2nd season. And it ended on a cliffhanger. Oh, so annoying.
Oh, no.
So bad.
Doesn't Freaks and Geeks end on a cliffhanger too?
I don't remember. I think it might. So many shows do.
I haven't seen Freaks and Geeks or My So-Called Life, but my sister watched both in high school, and she loved them both. I want to watch Freaks and Geeks. I have no idea what My So-Called Life is about, but my sister was just a big fan of Jared Leto's band.
Yeah,
and
I feel that.
Was like, oh, he's an actor. So she watched the show. And then, like, I don't know, a few years after she watched that show, he was in the Dallas Buyers Club, and he won an Oscar, and she was like, oh, it's weird that the guy that I like from a band is, like, an Oscar winner. What is My So-Called Life actually about, though?
It's about being a teenager, basically. Think about Freaks and Geeks, but more dramatic, basically, is what it is.
Live action Daria.
I would say that it's less funny than Daria, maybe.
Okay.
But it definitely tries to be a lot more dramatic, but it also comes off so, like, teenage angsty, which makes it funny. And, like, as a teenager, I was very self-aware that I was angsty, so I knew that the show was angsty, and I liked it because it was angsty, and I was like, this is funny because it's pathetic, and it's just so fun. It was great. I thought that the writing was actually really good with like characterization and everything. Ugh, I could go on about my so-called life for like hours. I really could. But we're not gonna do that.
Yes, we've been derailed so much in these last few recordings. Let me tell you, the last one we recorded was 50 minutes. I don't know what I cut it down to, but we're gonna try to really stay on topic. And by that, I mean that our topic that we're talking about now, short-lived TV shows, actually ties into the episode that we're talking about because Ron Howard, a very famous man who's done a lot of things, is a guest star on this episode, and he was the narrator of the short-lived TV show, until it wasn't, Arrested Development, which I love. First 3 seasons are incredible, and then the Netflix seasons are trash. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but they're objectively very bad. So let's just get into discussing young Ron Howard on this episode of MASH, which was incredible. Do you want to talk about what this episode was?
Yes. So I really, really love this episode. So this episode was called Sometimes You Hear the Bullet. And in it, Hawkeye is reunited with this childhood friend of his named Tommy, who joined the army to write a first-hand account about the atrocities of going to war. And unfortunately, some stuff happens after we meet Tommy. But this was just an incredible, incredible episode. One of my absolute favorites.
Yes. I think at the end of the season, we have to do our top 5 favorite episodes of the season. I think that's something that would be really fun. And we'd be hard pressed to find a better one than this, because this was truly like full stop an incredible episode of television.
Yeah.
MASH is often like regarded as the first like dramedy series, like comedy drama, and we've had some dramatic stuff in the last few episodes we've seen, like the one where they make a movie was a little bit like had a kind of a gut punch at the end, but this one was they did the drama very well. And I think it's a very defining episode of the early run.
Yeah, I have to agree. This one was probably, if not in the entire series, definitely in season 1, the most like hard-hitting with its drama and with its anti-war message. There is so much to unpack in this episode with the quotes and the storyline in general. The acting is also amazing from Alan Alda in particular. Oh my god, just fantastic.
Or even Ron Howard, I thought was very good in this episode.
Yeah,
and we'll get to him.
Yeah, so let's get into the just the more plot of the episode. So it starts out pretty funny where Frank and Margaret are on a date, and they're meeting in her tent, and Frank hurts his back when he's in Margaret's tent, and of course they have this whole affair going on that nobody can know about, even though everyone knows. And so Frank's like stuck, like he hurt his back, he threw out his back, right?
He looks like the L block in a Tetris game. Like he's just shaped like that.
And so Margaret's like, oh my god, like we can't call for help because they'll know that, we were like about to hook up. And so
everyone knows.
Yeah. So they throw Frank into the mud outside of Margaret's tent. I thought that was so ridiculous. I was like, wow, that's honestly so so on point.
This opening slapstick was definitely the sugar to make the medicine go down. Because really kind of after this opening bit, which again is very like goofy, and Frank like dips Margaret, and in the process, like just the way he's bent, he looks like the L block in Tetris. Like his legs are up, his back is like sideways. It's ridiculous. And it was definitely one of the like broader jokes in the show, just like he looks weird now and he's like in pain, and isn't that funny? Uh,
Yeah, this was actually just like a small part of the episode.
well, it ties in later.
It does tie in, I would say. I like that Frank's not in it that much, honestly.
Well, not much room for him in
Yeah.
this.
So then Frank is in the post-op because he is like, I don't know, they have him like suspended in like a weird like
Yeah.
chin strap. His legs are tied to the bed to like suspend him so
Never
that his
had a back
is...
injury before,
No,
Vanessa?
no, I have never had a back injury before, and I've never seen anyone who has.
I have. I had a back injury when I was like 7, so I have no memory of what they actually like did to me to make it better. But I did fracture my back once. That's a story for another time. But
So you don't remember if they suspended you up in the air like
I
Frank?
don't think they did. Okay, so it was like traumatic, you know. I
Yeah,
fractured
I
my
can
back on
imagine.
a school trip, and then I have literally no memory of what actually happened, other than coming home, and because of this injury, my uncle like sent me a PlayStation 2, like as I recovered, and that's how I got a PlayStation 2. And that's all I really remember about it, because it was a long time ago, and I've spent a lot of time in hospitals. I don't know if they suspended me like that. I don't think they did. Really keeping on track in this one.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm so sorry that you can't add more to our show about being suspended to a bed, even though you just told a very traumatic story about your back breaking.
It's fine.
So, like, while we're getting Frank recovering from this back injury that he had, he's applying for a Purple Heart, which is the medal that you get when you get injured in war.
Yes.
So
Frank is always the worst man in any situation.
it's like the most Frank Burns thing that you could possibly get, of like tripping in the mud, quote unquote, even though that's
He
not what he did.
hurt his back and making out with a girl. Whoa.
And he's applying for a Purple Heart. And I loved Hawkeye's line in this when he said, "Henry, you're not going to endorse this idiot's application, are you?" And then Margaret's like, "That's Major," and like angry that he called him an idiot. And then Hawkeye goes, "Henry, you're not going to endorse this major idiot's application, are you?" I loved that. That was like my
Yes.
favorite line.
I love that. But yeah, this opening bit, they do incorporate it really well with him applying in for the Purple Heart as it goes on. But it's kind of sidelined because Hawkeye runs into an old friend of his in the hospital.
Yeah, so this guy comes in and he's like begging for Hawkeye. He has his hands over his face and they're like, "Oh no, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And then it turns out to be this childhood friend of Hawkeye's named Tommy. And he just like grabs Hawkeye and hugs him. And it's such an adorable scene where they're like reunited in that moment. They're like, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" Because apparently he's a reporter or like a writer. And he's like, "Why are you in the war?"
It's great.
It's a really
they
cute
set
scene.
up Tommy very well. I like that he's a reporter. I wonder if that was a tie-in to MASH was originally a book about like a kind of true life account of army doctors,
Mhm.
and I wonder if that was like a subtle allusion to MASH originally being kind of a true life story.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't even think of that. So Hawkeye invites Tommy back to the swamp, and he and Hawkeye and Trapper are all drinking together. And Hawkeye asks him, like, why are you here? Why are you actually fighting in the war? Because he I guess enlisted or is a soldier. And he asks Tommy, "Why are you not a correspondent?" And Tommy explains why, and it was such a hard-hitting moment.
Oh yeah, there's a pin drop in this.
Oh, do you want to talk about why Tommy's like actually there?
Yes, because he says that correspondents don't get the full experience, so he's on the front lines, and he's explaining that he's writing this book about how, well, it's about the war in general, but it's named after this kid soldier who's like this idyllic blonde soldier, like the one that they would put in the movies. He was like next to him, and suddenly without hearing the bullet, the kid just gets like shot and dies. and this kid tells Tommy, like, oh, I didn't hear the bullet. And this is such a tone shift. This is such a hard left turn into, like, war is hell kind of thing.
Yeah.
It goes from, isn't it funny that Frank injured his back, and, like, look how much fun these guys are having talking to each other, to, like, a pin could drop, and you're like, yeah, I don't really know what to say. What do you have to say about this?
So in that scene, after Tommy explains war is not like the movies, because he said that in the war movies, you always hear this like ricochet to kind of indicate that someone's gonna die, like the main character, whoever it is, the hero of the movie. And he explained that it's not like that in real life. And after that, like you said, you can hear a pin drop. It's this pause, and I thought that was so well placed, because it kind of gave the audience like a second to internalize that, because we're not doing it justice of how he explains it, because he explained it really beautifully, and
Yes.
you get to kind of take that all in that moment when Hawkeye and Trapper are just like, wow, this is crazy, like this is terrible. War is so bad.
Yes. I mean, this show is out, like, from minute one is very critical of the army and the war and all of that. But this is one of the first times where they really just stop and be like, we're in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
It's very well done. And this actor who plays Tommy, I thought did just a really excellent job this episode. Like, really kind of nails this role.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely 100% agree with that. And there's this kind of like tonal shift going on throughout the whole episode, like with different scenes. And right after this, you get, it's kind of like funnier, because this is where we're introduced to Ron Howard's character,
who is called Ronnie Howard in the credits, right?
Is he
Because
really?
that's how early it is in his career. He's still Ronnie Howard.
That is so funny. That is
We
hysterical.
have a lot to say about Ron Howard. We'll get to him in a
Yes.
minute. We don't want to derail everything. Just be like, Ron Howard, love him. But Ron Howard rules, and I love how he was introduced in this episode, because when he's young, he's very distinctive. He has very clear red hair, and I wasn't sure if that was him, because I remembered this episode, of course. Like, how could you forget this? And when they're in the OR and Ron Howard's there, they don't show his face for a while, but you see, like, the red hair. I'm like, oh, is that Ron Howard? And then it is Ron Howard. And his storyline was also so well woven into this story. It was so good.
Yeah. So Ron Howard, his character, Wendell, his real name is Walter, which is, I thought, funny.
Mm-hmm.
He is this 15-year-old kid who took his brother's birth certificate and enlisted he's in the Marines. So this is some like hardcore stuff. And he's there for an appendectomy because his appendix just exploded. It wasn't because he actually got hurt in battle. So if not for this like very like, obviously it can happen to anybody, but this like childhood kind of thing where your appendix bursts, he wouldn't have been found out, because Hawkeye and Trapper were both saying, this kid looks way too young to be 20 or 18 or old enough at all. In fact, Hawkeye even said, I guess if they're tall enough to reach the trigger, they're old enough to enlist, because that's how young Ron Howard looked in this episode.
I'm not sure how old Ron Howard actually was, but
he was 18.
Oh, nice. So he really was kind of this really fresh-faced kid. And he's been acting forever. Again, we're gonna get into it. But this whole thing was really good. I thought Ron Howard performed really well. And I related to the injury aspect, because I've also had an appendectomy. This apparently is the Ethan surgery injury hour, where I let you in on maybe too much of my life. But I've also had an I cannot say it. I've had my appendix taken out. So that's fun. I related to that as well. And this whole thing with Ron Howard saying how much younger he is, because they clock it immediately, like they're not fooling it, or he's not fooling anyone. because even Hawkeye asks him like, "Oh, how old are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm 20." And then he like immediately, without even like much prodding, it's like, "No, I'm actually 18." And that's a lie too, but like he immediately backpedaled without any pushback. I don't know. Again, I don't really know what to say because it's just like, this is a good episode.
And this scene too, where Hawkeye is first introduced to Ron Howard's character, I noted. I'm sure that you heard it too, but Ron Howard's character used the same anti-Asian slur that they said in the last episode, and I was like, wow. 2 episodes and 2 slurs. Cool, great. But in this one, Hawkeye definitely like rebuts it rather than let it slide like he did in the last episode. And it kind of tied in with the whole theme of like war just being terrible, because Ron Howard uses this slur, and obviously, you know, not okay. And Hawkeye says,
they're Koreans, they're people.
Yeah, Hawkeye says another word for that is people. Like, you know, hello, like we're fighting a war and it's people. So I thought that was handled pretty well.
No, I thought it was great. Because last episode, it was kind of said offhandedly and not rebutted at all. But that was kind of to make the Leslie Nielsen character feel more like a bad guy.
Yeah.
But this one, I think it really spoke to, because Ron Howard's character enlisted in the war as a 15-year-old entirely to impress a girl in high school, which is ridiculous, but that does happen. Like, that's a very like teenage mentality, I'm sure. Like, you go back, this has happened before, and him using this like racial slur kind of spoke to, I think, him viewing the war as like not a game, but like not something, like he wasn't mature enough yet to kind of comprehend everything. The way they used it, I thought, was very good for story purposes. And the way that Hawkeye corrects him shows that he's not, like, a bad guy. He's just, you know, a young kid who's kind of in over his head and wants to be more macho than he really is.
Yeah, I thought that, again, this tied in so well with the theme of this really kind of anti-war message, because you have a literal child fighting in a real war, and like this child is showing the audience like his like childhood ambitions of like why he wants to even be in the war in the first place, and how he can't really like fully grasp why he's even there, because the reason that he enlisted was for this like such childlike purpose. And it really, for me, drove home the fact that the show was trying to get at this war is being fought by kids. And
yeah,
you know, it was just, I thought it was really well done.
It's very good. This episode is, remember how the cowboy episode was,
yes.
according to this like Time article, was like the episode of season 1? I'm like, did you only watch 5 episodes of season 1? Like, this was right here. This is right here. This is a defining episode.
I was gonna bring this up too, because I just keep going back to how many like better episodes there were than Cowboy as like a classic MASH episode. And we'll get into it a little bit later on, but there's a quote in this that's like everyone uses when they talk about MASH. And I was like, how did they pick Cowboy over this? Insane to me. Just insane.
And I liked Cowboy when we watched it, but now every time I see a superior episode, I'm like, oh yeah, no, Cowboy's kind of trash, actually. Why did they list this one as like...
TV Guide was wrong.
Yeah, TV Guide's a hack. Nobody uses you anymore. We all have digital guides on our TV. Get out of here.
So, at the end of this little scene with Hawkeye and Wendell, who is actually Walter, Hawkeye says to him, hey, listen, like, you know, I'm not here to rat you out. As long as your appendix heals, go on your way. I don't really care what you do. I don't care.
Well, his appendix not healed. It's gone.
Well, yeah, his, like, surgery, his, like, yeah. So, you know what I mean. And then, again, we get this other massive tonal shift where they're in the ER again, and Hawkeye's working on a bunch of patients. It seems like, you know, not that they're, like, really swamped with a lot of people, but then they bring in this person who is in really bad shape. And it's a chest wound, so they call Hawkeye over, and it turns out that it's Tommy, his friend, who had went back to the front lines and was hit with a bullet in the chest, in the heart. And
this was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
This was played so well. This was just legitimate medical drama, and it wasn't over the top. It wasn't like a soap opera. This was Hawkeye trying to save his friend, and everyone around him knows immediately, like, this guy is not, like, there's nothing we can do. And it's so well done. Just, again, the fact that there's no laugh track in noir scenes, not that there would be, but, like, in theory, you could put, like, an awe or whatever, an audience reaction, but because there is none, this is just played so intensely.
Yeah.
And you can really feel the emotion of it. I was so surprised at how effective just everything felt in this. It was so good.
Yeah, and you get the title of the episode because previously Tommy had said, you know, you don't hear the bullet, or whatever the book title was going to be. And then right before he passes away on the table, he says to Hawkeye, you know what's funny? Like, I heard the bullet. And Hawkeye says to him, well, you'll just change the book title. Sometimes you hear the bullet. It's a better book title anyway. And it's like one of the last things that he says to him. And, you know, then Tommy passes away, and Hawkeye is really ready to try everything he can to save him. And Henry is like, you know, stop. It's not going to work.
It's like, no, it's no good. And when he says, like, give me the knife, you can really feel the emotion in that. I think Alan Alda is incredible in this episode.
When Henry says, Pierce, go help McIntyre, like, you know, we're like, just leave it. The look on Alan Alda's face was just like, honestly,
through a mask too.
It's something that I have remembered from like childhood watching it. I'm not even kidding. Like when this episode came up on our deck to watch, I was like, oh my god, they're gonna have that scene with like Hawkeye's just like piercing blue eyes, just like looking just completely
and
broken.
Nothing else. That's what's kind of incredible about it, is that it's all his eyes because he's wearing a surgical mask. And I'm just saying, like, maybe Alan Alda's the greatest TV actor to ever live, because he sold so much with just a look of his eyes, and I'm like always so jealous of any actor who has that much control over their face, that they can express so much with so little. It's so... I just keep saying it, but this episode is truly incredible television. Like, full stop, like... I don't care who you are. You could watch this and just be like, yep, that's an effective piece.
TV Guide was wrong. This is the classic MASH episode. But then what's even more impactful, I think, and really, again, like kind of drives home the anti-war, anti-military, like militarism message that is afterwards when Henry goes to like see how Hawkeye's doing, because Hawkeye walks out of the OR and you get this back shot of Hawkeye and he says to Henry, I've never cried, like this is the first time I cried since I came here. And then the camera pulls around to Hawkeye and Alan Alda's crying, or at least like he's supposed to be crying. And I can only imagine that was kind of like really hard hitting in the 1970s when you still had kind of like a men are manly men, like men don't cry kind of attitude going on. And I don't know, that it was just so well done. I just absolutely loved it.
So I did not cry watching this, not to sound like a manly man. I cry at literally everything. I've cried at Guardians of the Galaxy 2. But man, when he was like, I was legit like misty-eyed. I was like very close to actually crying. Did you cry? I know you've seen this more than I have.
I think the reason that I didn't actually shed any tears, I was misty-eyed too when Tommy died, and then this scene after. I was misty-eyed, but I didn't cry because I have seen it like 7 times, so I was desensitized.
Of course, but I forget what they actually said during this.
I got you. I wrote this shit down. I don't want to mess it up. So I wrote it down exactly.
This whole exchange was, I applaud everyone involved. Like, not to oversell, like, I don't think we're overselling this.
No, because it was just really good.
But this whole section was so emotional, and it didn't feel out of place or melodramatic. Like, it felt just very authentic and very, like, real. And, like, this is a show that can be very funny, but it's also a show that can kind of go for it with emotions. And this is a real showcase for that.
So this quote that I was mentioning before was from Henry. Henry says, "All I know is what they taught me in command school. There are certain rules about a war, and rule number 1 is young men die, and rule number 2 is doctors can't change rule number 1. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone discuss MASH without discussing that quote, because it is so quintessential to the show, I feel. It is really what the show was about. And in this moment, you get this scene of the back of Hawkeye's head. Like, it's Hawkeye, and then Henry is talking to Hawkeye, but he's not looking at the camera, but, you know, you're on Henry's face. And I really felt that Henry was talking to the audience at this point as well, kind of, again, driving home this message, that reminding the audience that, yeah, you're watching this show, right, about these doctors, and it's pretty lighthearted most of the time, and they save a lot of their patients and stuff like that, but, you know, all these wonderful doctors are not going to stop men from dying in a war, and we shouldn't be sending people off to die in a war. And it was just so amazing. I just absolutely can't get over this scene.
Yes, that's a very good quote. That's an incredible quote, actually. It didn't quite hit me in the moment, because it was just kind of everything happening, you know. It was like in context, but like, that's the kind of quote, and it's from a TV show. But like, if you're reading a book or whatever, and like that's the opening epigraph, you'd be like, yeah, that's a good quote.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even think twice of it being like from a comedy show. That's kind of incredible. And I've said this before, but man, oh man, Scrubs kind of ripped off MASH in every which way, because Scrubs have done like very similar things of how like you can't save every patient, that kind of thing. And like, yeah, they 100% kind of took that from MASH.
Yeah, MASH is very influential. Absolutely.
Yeah, dude. This is a good piece, you know?
I liked also how at the end of this scene, they kind of wrapped it up. After Henry's quote there, Hawkeye was like, well, I know what I can do, like, to save one young man from dying in one.
This one doctor can save this one soldier. And he runs over to Ron Howard, and he grabs Major Houlihan and tells her, like, hey, this kid's 15. Get some military police. Guard him. He's going home. And Ron Howard's like, hey, you're a jerk. Like, I hate you. And I'm going to hate you for all my life. And Hawkeye pauses and is like, I hope it's a long, healthy hate. And I'm like, so good, because he really did just save this kid's life. He's 15.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be in war when you're 15, even if you're trying to impress a girl. Very, very good. Hawkeye, love him. Love Ron Howard. Again, Ron Howard's whole performance, we haven't gone into it, but I thought his whole bit in this episode was also very good. If the episode was just Tommy and without the Ron Howard, I feel like it wouldn't have worked as well. But because we have these two storylines kind of intersecting each other, it really kind of sold it and like made it intertwine and like holistic, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like how at the end, the very end, it kind of came back to comedy. After being so hard hitting, it wouldn't be MASH, right? Without some comedy. So at the end, right before the credits, there's this like pinning ceremony for Frank and for his Purple Heart.
Because he did get the Purple Heart.
Yeah, apparently he got approved. So Radar and Henry are presenting it to him, and it turns out that Hawkeye steals Frank's Purple Heart and gives it to Walter. And Ron Howard goes, wow, Hawkeye, you got that really fast. And Hawkeye was like, yeah, don't worry about it, because he stole it from Frank. It was really funny.
No, it was, again, very well written. Like, just having this very much a joke thing come back at the end to kind of give Ron Howard something to go home with was very good.
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed that they did that. Just kind of character-wise, like, I wish Ron Howard realized that, like, this girl that he's in the army for isn't good enough, because she broke up with him because this other kid came home with a medal from the army. And he's like, I'm gonna go get a medal. And then he does get a medal, like, coincidentally. But, like, Hawkeye tells him, like, listen, is a girl really worth it? Like, do you want a girl who's gonna break up with you over not having a military medal at 15? It would kind of undercut that a bit, but, like, it tied it in so well with Frank's comedy storyline that, like, you gotta give it a pass.
Yeah, absolutely. I just can't believe how many people kind of just, like, went into the army to impress other people, because we got that in the episode Edwina, too. Like, she went into the war
to find a man.
And then
ranted about.
Oh my god. So weird.
Apparently the military is just popping off to find a romance.
Ugh, so strange. But do you have anything else to say about this episode other than the fact that it was really good?
Okay, so one thing we completely skipped over was this little subplot about Hawkeye trying to go on a date with this this nurse, and at one point their date is interrupted because there's a fight in the OR, and these guys are, like, yelling about how he stole his salami, and it was just, like, ridiculous. And my favorite line, though, that was, like, a comedic line, was he gives the guys over to Radar to, like, watch, and he tells Radar, like, if anything happens again, beat these guys senseless with their own salamis.
That was such, like, a weird thing to throw in there. I was like, I guess it was filler for time, but I don't know.
Like,
it was just
we're
so
a minute
strange.
short.
Yeah, right.
And we gotta have some comedy in here. Like, we're still a sitcom, so why not have two guys fight over salami? And we got a really good line about it. So, like, whatever. What do you think? What was your favorite bit that we haven't mentioned yet?
So I thought that was cute. I thought that it was really funny how just every time Hawkeye was trying to get with this nurse, he was interrupted and had to be called away. But one thing that we didn't mention in the beginning of the episode, when Tommy first comes into the OR and Hawkeye introduces Tommy to Henry, Tommy, like, full on kisses Henry on the mouth. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so funny. And I can imagine that it was kind of, like, I wouldn't say groundbreaking, because it wasn't really played that way.
No, that wasn't a romantic kiss at all.
No. Yeah, absolutely not. But I can imagine that it was very, like, shocking almost, because I'm sure that had to be one of the first times, like, guys, like, kissed on the mouth, like, on TV. Because this is the time period when that kind of, like, started happening. So I just thought it was really funny for, like, the time. It was definitely played for laughs, and it wasn't romantic or supposed to be any kind of, like, social thing at all. But I just thought it was really funny, and how it must have been very, like, oh my god, two men kissing.
Awkward.
I know.
Henry
it was
so awkward afterwards, and it was really funny. Because, to be fair, if anybody just randomly kissed me, I'd be like, yeah, hello, how are you doing?
Yeah.
This was really well balanced, too. This episode was really funny, and also, when it wanted to be, it was really, like, hard-hitting. And that's something that I applaud for this, is that it wasn't, like, a complete downer the entire time, and it didn't feel like the jokes undercut the more important moments. They balanced it very well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I do have a little bit of trivia on our guest actors. So the actor who played Tommy, his name is James Callahan, and he actually served in the army during the Korean War. So I thought that was pretty cool. He worked for the Postal Service, which, very, very important. Everyone wants their letters.
Yeah, support your local post office.
He had a recurring role in 3 1960s sitcoms called Wendy and Me, Convoy, and The Governor and JJ, all of which I have never seen, but would definitely check out if I ever found them.
The Governor and JJ sounds like the name of, like, an indie band.
You're right. That is so funny.
But I've never heard of those either. But I'm sure, because he is really good in this episode,
Yeah,
I'm sure those
absolutely.
shows are at least mildly interesting because he's in them and he does a good job. I bet he's a good actor in other such things.
Yeah, and unfortunately he passed away in 2007 at the age of 76. So
76
he had
is a pretty good run.
a pretty good run, right? So we love you, James Callahan.
Yeah, good actor.
So, and then as Ethan and I were saying before, we have a love for Ron Howard, I would say.
Oh, yes.
You and I have a pretty big fangirl just moment about Ron Howard.
I fangirled pretty hard over Ron Howard. I love Ron Howard. I think he's great. He's obviously been an actor and director forever. Like, he was a child actor on what was it? What show is he on?
So I don't know if it was his very first role, but it was definitely his first like recurring role, the role that really made him into an actor. He was on the Andy Griffith Show and he played Opie, and he was so cute and so adorable. He was like 5. If you ever get a chance to watch it, if you know Ron Howard and you haven't seen the Andy Griffith Show and scenes that he's in, amazing. He is the cutest little kid.
But he's also, as an actor, he's in American Graffiti, which is one of my all-time favorite movies by George Lucas before he did Star Wars. He does a very good teenage performance in there. And he's such, like, a handsome kid. His jawline in this episode, I was like, that's insane. This kid's got such a defined jaw. But, of course, he is more well known today as a really big director.
Before you get to that, though, he was also on Happy Days, which have to say, if anyone listening has not seen Happy Days, please watch it.
I haven't
Amazing.
seen Happy Days.
Oh my god, are you serious?
I've never seen a second Happy Days.
Ethan, Happy Days is so good.
Happy Days is that they jump the shark. That's where that comes from.
Yes, well, that is true, but just watch Happy Days until that episode.
Okay.
Amazing. Fantastic.
I will watch Happy Days. I forgot that he was on that. Yeah, and he's also the narrator in Arrested Development, and the narrator in Arrested Development is like the best part of that show. It's really good, and before we recorded, you said that you actually haven't seen Arrested Development, or you didn't know that he was the narrator in it.
Yeah,
and
I didn't know.
To fix that immediately because it's the best. Ron Howard is more well known today as a director. In fact, I would say that he is a director that has also acted in the past rather than a actor who is a director as well. He's directed so many like good movies. Not all of them are like incredible, but A Beautiful Mind is, I think, still a really great movie, which he directed and I think won Best Director for. He did a movie called Rush with Chris Hemsworth, which is really fun. He also did the Han Solo Star Wars movie, which I didn't like at all, but still, greatest bit for that movie was that they had Ron Howard narrate the entire Star Wars trilogy like it was an episode of Arrested Development, and they edited it like it was, and it's on the Star Wars YouTube channel, and I watched that video a lot. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever seen. That is so
funny.
I love Ron Howard.
But when I was looking up Ron Howard, actually, he did so many movies that I literally had no idea. Like, he directed Apollo 13, How the Grinch Stole Christmas,
that's a great
The
movie.
Da Vinci Code, Cinderella Man, and this movie Ransom. I don't know if you know it, but it is such a good movie. He's
shocked. A great director.
I was shocked. Needless to say, we just love Ron Howard. So, just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Burbalko for being our technical consultant, Melissa, my sister, for cover art, and of course, our listeners. Our music, social media, and contacts for the show are linked in the description, as always. And until next time, don't fight people over salami. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.